All right, so a classic question is, when do you give up on a quarterback? Obviously, we all think about the Josh Rosen thing, when the Cardinals, of course, famously gave up on Josh Rosen, went with Kyler Murray. It worked out. They were very successful at least have made the playoffs with Kyler Murray, and I think they certainly would rather have Murray than Rosen. They were successful in giving up on a quarterback early on. But when do you want to do that? I made a video about this about a year ago where I kind of basically just looked at the projections and said, which baselines do you have to clear to be successful and to not be given up on, basically. So for quarterbacks, I use two different stats. I use Pro Football Focus grade, and then I also used passer rating. And the Pro Football Focus grade just translated a lot better. So that's what we're going to do in this video, is basically use that data that I found from the video last year and see which of the year 1, 2, or 3 quarterbacks that are currently in the NFL are projecting well to perform well for the rest of their career. So yeah, let's just get into it, and we'll start off with the rookies. So these are the rookie quarterbacks, and just to set up how this table works, one thing I should mention is some of these did deal with a bit of small sample sizes in certain categories. I think some even had as low as a sample size of 10, which is still worth noting, but it's still interesting to me. But the small sample sizes can create a little bit of some errors along the way. I think it can give you a good broad idea, but probably won't give you a precise and exact idea of this stuff. But anyways, so we're gonna, just so you know how this works, basically what this is first I looked at every rookie quarterback's Pro Football Focus grade. How well they performed will put you into specific categories, and then once you get in that category, I looked at, well, how well did other rookies perform when they were in that category? And the results are on the screen. So for Mac Jones, the one at the top, players who performed as well as he did as a rookie, 60% would go on to be great, 20% would go on to be good. None in that category, again, this is one of the smaller sample sizes, would go on to do what I considered some value. So this is a guy who basically think of them as like a Tyrod Taylor type of, like, there's some value in him, but he's not, like, I wouldn't call him good necessarily. He's not a top 20 player in the league. And then bust, 20% in the Mac Jones era would still end up going on to be bust even if they were very good. But for the most part, guys who performed as well as Mac Jones did would, on average, end up being great. So, I mean, this makes some sense, right? The best predictor of being good at the NFL level is being good at the NFL level. Jones was good as a rookie, so it stands to reason that he should go on to be very good, but it isn't a guarantee. Meanwhile, for Justin Fields, he was in one category lower, but there's still some good odds of him. 40% chance of being great, 20% chance of being good, 40% chance of having some value, and then a 0% bust chance. So again, this is kind of where the small sample size comes into play a little bit, of there being a higher bust chance with Mac Jones, but obviously that's probably not really true. But again, gives you a broad idea, right? Okay, on average, players who perform as well as Justin Fields go on to be good NFL players. So think like tier 2 or tier 3 quarterbacks. And then finally, for the bottom 4, I included Davis Mills there because why not? But for the bottom 4, this is the numbers, and quite frankly, it's a little bit scary. I mean, these are guys who we all, certainly at least 3 of these guys we all liked heading into the draft: Lawrence, Wilson, and Lance, and even Mills had some fans. But the chances for them to be great are dim. I mean, 7.7% chance. Only 7.7 of the players who performed in that bottom tier in their rookie year would go on to be great quarterbacks. Now, odds get a little bit better to be good. Odds get a little bit better to have some value, but clearly, over a 60% chance of being a bust. And again, it's less of a projection and more of just talking about the results that have happened in the past. So it's not entirely like I'm saying there's a 60% chance that all of these guys will be a bust, but there's a pretty good chance at least a couple of these guys are probably going to be a bust. I think that's totally reasonable to say. So little bit scary there. You really want to see these guys pick it up. The one thing I would say, though, is they were all very close to that threshold that you have to be at. You want to get a PFF grade of a certain number, and they were all within a couple of points of that certain number. So I wouldn't be too panicked by it, but still, just a little bit concerning. Moving on to the next year, because again, the numbers change how long you've been in the league. You don't have to be as good after your rookie year as you do after your second year. You have to be better in your second year. So guys like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, I mean, for them, it's kind of obvious that, like, yeah, their numbers project them to be great because they're great now. So, of course, we expect them to be great. Now, it's also worth mentioning people that perform very well don't necessarily end up continuously being great. I mean, Carson Wentz was awesome his second year. Didn't work out that way. But for the most part, guys in this section probably going to be great or at least good, and very rare that they will end up being a bust. Tua, which is a very interesting guy to talk about, right? He's always someone who, I mean, listen, he creates controversy, right? There's people that love Tua. There's people that think that Tua is trash. And where he's projecting now would be some value, which I think is a little bit disappointing if you're a Dolphins fan. You would like to see that be a little bit better. You would rather him at least be good, because I think for them to win a Super Bowl with Tua, they're going to at least need him to be a good quarterback. He doesn't have to be a great quarterback because he's not getting paid much right now, but you got to get in that good category. But again, there's a chance that happens. We're not saying, these projections aren't necessarily saying this is what's going to happen, just this is what is most likely to happen if you pay attention to nothing else other than PFF grades. Jalen Hurts, who was a second-round pick that year, I decided to give it good. It's right on the line between good and some value, so whatever. I threw it to good, but it's good or some value. It's like right on that line, so whatever you want to pick, which kind of projects for Hurts. And again, similar thing with Tua. The goal right now, I think if you have Jalen Hurts, isn't for him to be this elite quarterback. There's a chance he does it. He's been pretty good. He was pretty good last year. There is a chance that happens, but you at least want him to be good, and then in the next 2 years while he's cheap, you have a real chance to win a Super Bowl that way. Also, Tyler Huntley, threw him on there. He's projecting to probably have some value. There is a chance he ends up being a bust. Again, is a chance he ends up being elite. Guys in his tier have gone on to be elite, but that's where he's at. And then finally, final tier. So again, someone like Kyler Murray, he was really good last year, so it stands to reason that he has a good chance of being great in his final year. Even someone like Daniel Jones, though, this is fascinating to me, is still projecting to be solid. He's projecting to be good. Now again, about to enter your fourth year, so this is kind of the last year you get before you really start getting paid. The fifth year option isn't, it's still pretty affordable for quarterbacks, but it's still, you're starting to pay them more, and then after that year, of course, then you're really paying them. So you kind of wasted all of that affordable stuff with Daniel Jones, but there still is a chance he is great, and in fact, him being great is the most likely outcome according to, if you look at each one individually, but the overall most likely outcome would be for him to, like, the average player that has, been in his projections ends up being good. For Locke and Minshew, their projections is some value, which I guess is at least better than a bust with Drew Lock's case. That means he could at least be like potentially a decent backup. I guess that there's some hope there. You'll make some money doing that. So that's the idea, and same thing with Minshew. So yeah, what does this all tell us? Well, it tells us a couple of things. I mean, for one, it tells us there is a chance Daniel Jones is solid. So you got that. I guess that's one thing we've learned, is it's not worth just throwing him away just yet. And kind of like how I feel about the Giants in this run is I feel like the Giants completely failed to build a team around him. So we just don't know about Daniel Jones, and you kind of have to give him another year, which is just, it's sort of similar to what Miami did with Tannehill, right? And Tannehill had some inconsistencies and some injuries, which kind of led to him leaving. But it's like you kind of are in a situation where you don't want to give up on a guy necessarily because they have shown some flashes, but at the same time, like, they haven't shown enough that really makes you want to give him a contract, and you're wasting time by keeping him there. But that's interesting. And I also think it says for, like, certain players, like for Tua, for example, I don't think they should just get rid of Tua because he is affordable, but you should at least be open to the idea. And, there was some talk about the Deshaun Watson stuff, and let's just say the Deshaun Watson stuff before the allegations came out to make it the conversation strictly football, although I guess that doesn't work because that's a year ago. But if we're just talking football, that would be the kind of situation where, like, yeah, okay, here's a guy who can be successful, but the odds are kind of against him a little bit. So let's just go out and let's get someone like, that's more of a sure thing. You can make that argument, but you don't have to. And that's kind of, there's a difference between someone who you should move on from and someone who you could look to move on from. And I think that Tua is maybe in that later tier. You could argue Hurts is as well. One thing I'll say about Hurts, though, is last year he was projecting to be a bust. Now he's projecting to be good. So that, again, proves that this, just because that's your most likely projection does not mean that that's going to happen. And that's where people get a little bit confused sometimes, is they think, well, wait a second, if this guy was projected to be good and they ended up sucking, then clearly the projections are wrong. Like, well, no, not exactly. Again, this isn't a complete science by any means. It is a small sample size. But even taking that aside, I think it's fair to say that with someone like a Jalen Hurts, these are still good things to look at. That's kind of all my point tends to be. I want to know it, right? It might not be an exact science. I still want to know it for sure. And then it also kind of goes to show, it's like, hey, it's reason to be optimistic about Fields. Definitely give him another year. I don't know what Chicago's doing there. That's a weird thing. But, I'm someone who wasn't a huge fan of Justin Fields coming out of the draft. But I thought I liked at least certain parts of what I saw out of his game. And I'm really interested in seeing if they could put a good team around him. How do we feel? I think it's fair to say, hey, with Mac Jones, let's really go for it. If you're New England, let's use these next, 2-3 years and really try to be a contender for 3 years when you have a quarterback who's projecting to be really good and on a cheap deal. And again, it's kind of interesting where with Lawrence, Wilson, and Lance, do you give up on that 7.7 chance to go out and, get a different guy or maybe just get a backup? To me, I don't think I would hate it if Jacksonville spent their second round pick, which is a high second round pick, on another quarterback, right? Same thing with the Jets. Or the 49ers have less draft capital and they're trying to be competitive. I don't know if I'd love that for them, but for the Jets and the Jaguars, the whole goal is to get a good quarterback. I don't think that's the crazy thing in the world to do. I especially think the Texans should do it because I don't know why everyone seemingly loves Davis Mills. I'm seemingly the only person who I feel like watched him play last year sometimes because, he showed flashes. Again, there's a chance it works out, but would you be willing to completely bet on it? Take a flyer on someone else as well. Have a plan B. That's always what I like to say about quarterbacks. You want a plan B as well. So maybe you take a plan B with even really hyped up quarterbacks. I don't think it'd be the worst idea in the world because there is a chance it works out, but there's a bigger chance it doesn't. So let's just, take a plan B. That's kind of the way I view that stuff. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.